Hi everyone, welcome back to the Mentors Connect podcast. Today I'm very excited to have Caroline Bauer on, who is a very inspiring and accomplished woman. She is the CEO of BTC Markets, which is the largest digital asset exchange in Australia, which is super cool. So thank you so much, Caroline, for coming on today. And we're very excited to be able to hear your insights and your amazing story.
Thank you very much for having me. You're very good.
Thank you. So getting us started, could you tell us a bit about yourself, your journey to now being the CEO of BTC Markets?
Yeah, brilliant. So, okay, first of all, it's BTC Markets.
I know BTC Markets. Bitcoin. Yes. Sorry, guys. It's just natural.
Yeah, of course, right. You see Bitcoin. So I started originally in Dublin, working for a private client stockbroker back in the day when everything was still paper based. And so I started off my career understanding the flow of capital markets and the flow of our financial services system, because it was literally sheets of paper and moving people around. And my first project was moving people from a paper based system into a digital system, and have kind of been recreating that same project ever since. And then I worked for a US investment bank in Dublin and moved with them to Singapore back at the start of 2008, just when the GFC was kicking off.
Oh, yeah.
And hunkered down in Singapore for about 10 years and ended up working on the trading floor, dealing with hedge fund clients. I was in an area called prime brokerage. Loved that, learned so much all about how our financial services system works. But left it and went back to university in Singapore, and I did another degree in communications, and left and ended up setting up the first PR kind of strategy comms agency in Asia Pacific, dealing in blockchain and fintech companies.
Very early on too.
Oh yeah, back in the day, like 2014 kind of time frame, 2014, 2015, something like that. And that was a huge learning curve, I think, for anybody. Like, I had come from like a really pressurized environment and a really pressurized role, that nothing could prepare you for running your own business. I think the pressure that comes with that, the responsibility that comes with running your own business, is very unique and not like at all any other circumstances I've experienced. But I think then those challenges really set me up well for this role. So I grew the business that I had and sold out the business and had moved to Melbourne, but in the interim had met the team at BTC Markets and really liked their approach to crypto. So coming from a very regulated environment, working in banks and traditional finance, there was an absence of that at times amongst companies working in crypto, particularly back in those days. But not at BTC Markets. They had always really led with a very much compliant approach in mind, which I thought as well too was quite clever, because even back then it was obvious that compliance and regulation were going to come in and play a big part. Anyway, all that being said, I took some time off after I sold the company, and in that intimate time, BTC Markets approached me and asked would I be interested in coming on board and being the CEO. So I joined this January 2020, I think it was, and 6 weeks later we went into lockdown here in Victoria. And so a lot of the business has been from various kitchen tables. A lot of it has been done. Kind of building a team and building the culture from there. So it's been quite the journey.
No, that sounds so amazing, though. And you've definitely had an amazing journey going away from Dublin to, now all the way down here to Australia. So now I wanted to get us started in the bulk of this podcast episode, which is discussing the future. So my first question for you, Caroline, I think you're pretty qualified to discuss this, but what makes crypto so valuable?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think if you want to just look at Bitcoin, I think first and primarily, the scarcity factor, like the fact that for a fact that only 21 million Bitcoin are ever going to be mined, and that's it, and that's hard coded and can't be changed. I think that gives it a value different that differs rather from where we are with fiat currency.
Yeah, so not got inflation, don't have to worry about it.
Right, this is it. So it's a deflationary asset, so I think there's a value to it there. I think too that the transparency around cryptocurrency on blockchain, the speed of the transaction flow coming from traditional finance, where money transfers can take, a couple of days, a day, even trades to settle can take a day.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Right, can take to a near immediate settlement time of, for Bitcoin it's about 10 minutes. For other cryptos it's even quicker. That's really important. I think that adds a value to it as well, that exchange of value. And when you look at countries like El Salvador that rely so heavily on remittances from overseas to get that money, or they get that value into their economy as quickly, as inexpensively, as efficiently as crypto and Bitcoin does, makes a really good case for why they've adopted it alongside the US dollar as legal tender. And then obviously in more current times, looking at what's happening in the Ukraine and how both regular Ukrainians and regular Russians have turned to crypto and Bitcoin in particular, kind of creates the value and the use case for it, obviously under quite tragic circumstances, but nonetheless points to it. And I think a lot of the time when I have conversations with people who are based either in Australia or in, the UK, Ireland, where I'm from, or, even parts of Asia and the US, wealth shelters us a lot from the realities of life. And talking to people who come from second or third world economies, they very clearly, very quickly see the use case and benefit of something like Bitcoin, because they understand it holds its value. It's not going to be devalued overnight by their government. That economic mismanagement isn't going to be a threat to their hard work and the fruits of their labor. So it's very, very clear to them what the use case is for Bitcoin. And I think, if you look at where it's come over the last 10 plus years or so, I think that message is getting out there now. And I think people are really seeing it, especially in light of, as I say, what's been happening in the Ukraine.
No, definitely. I agree with that 100%. So now, continuing on, how have young people contributed to the rise of crypto? I think particularly in the past year, obviously, it's just blown up. So tell us more. Yeah,
absolutely. I think too that there's this perception that it's kind of like young men in hoodies that are the only people who are trading crypto. And that's actually not true. What we've found in our exchange, the bulk of our client base are those aged between 25 and 44. And invariably, yes, they are male, but, they generally are, East Coast based, earn about 100K a year. That's the average trader that we found on our exchange. But where young people have had the impact is actually around its culture. I think that there's a very strong cultural element to cryptocurrency on all of our social media platforms. I think that the use case is very easily understood by younger people who are living in the digital economy, because that's where their culture sits. Yeah. There's a very easy and very clear opportunity for young people. Like, they just get it. And then I was at Blockchain Week was happening here in Australia last week, organized by Blockchain Australia, of which I'm a board member. And the third day was here in Melbourne, and it was around NFTs. And so frequently the conversation turned to culture. Actually, Yatsu, who's the CEO, co-founder of Animoca Brands, I interviewed him and he brought up culture as part of what they feel is their remit. And I was going to ask him then, I mean, how do you protect that culture? Like how do you respond to the people who are creating the culture in particular? Because invariably that's young people. And because you can't take that for granted. And I think that, there's a saying in business, culture eats strategy for breakfast, but I think it's more that culture lasts longer than any of our governments, any of our economies, any of those kind of things. It's the culture as a thread that goes through, and young people are driving the culture around the crypto economy and into NFTs and all that wider space. So yeah, I think it's fantastic. And also the enthusiasm with which they embrace the topic. And so I came of age in the internet era, and you guys are coming of age in the crypto NFT era.
Yeah. So, at Christmas, my cousin was asking about what's these Bored Apes and all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
So you're right, the culture's happening, and the young people are definitely talking about it. So now, I want to get to our next question. So you kind of touched on it before whilst you're talking about your background story and what makes crypto valuable, but how has crypto challenged traditional currencies?
Ooh, that's a really good question, because it's challenged it, but I still think there's room to work alongside it. I don't necessarily think that crypto is going to completely subvert fiat or traditional currency as we know it, certainly not in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't see that necessarily happening. What it has done, though, is highlighted some of the weaknesses and flaws in our previous system. and you got to keep in mind that in the history of money, it has always changed. It has always iterated. It was, bags of salt. It was, pebbles. It's been lots of different various things. It's been gigantic stone wheels over the course of time. So there isn't one version of money, what money can be. And I think, as technology keeps on iterating, money changes with it. What this technology iteration has done has shown, the lack of transparency in traditional finance, how slow it is, and also how expensive it is, because you've got intermediaries in the middle of all of that transaction flow, all of which changes with cryptocurrency. And I think that's probably a point that I try to drill home as much as I can when I do different types of media, is around that transparency piece, particularly lately with the conversation around Russian sanctions. It's trying to explain to people that we have the technical capability to track and trace the flow of a specific crypto token for all eternity. There is no way to erase it. It's immutable. It's on the blockchain. We can see where it goes. We cannot do that with a $1 token or a $1 bill. That's just not possible. And so that's a real benefit for, people who are trying to fight crime and the sources of crime, criminal activity. We can track and trace it. And so it gives us such a great tool. And I think with that, actually, the Chainalysis, who are a blockchain analytics firm that we use at BTC Markets, but lots of different crypto exchanges use them, and government agencies in the US use them. They reported that 0.15% of crypto transactions in 2021 were linked to illicit activities. So that is less than half. Yeah, right. All scams and everything's dodgy. But it's now reached the stage. Crypto's now reached the stage and the size that the use of it as illicit activities is absolutely minuscule. And we can measure it and we can prove that. We cannot do the same within our banking system. Like, one of the numbers that I've seen bashed around about, anti-money laundering, or the failure of AML processes, they estimate up to between 800 million and 2 trillion US dollars a year are money laundered through our existing financial services system. They can't know, they don't know, they have no way of tracing it, but we can do that within the crypto. Yeah. So when you talk about, kind of where crypto can kind of lead the way, or where it does, the technology, that's one very, very keen and clear point of difference.
No, that definitely makes sense. And I think it was really good that you highlighted that, because often crypto, is played out as this, just criminals use it. But no, it's got a lot of good use cases. So now Absolutely. I want to talk about, so obviously cryptocurrency, it's still very new. And as a result of that, there's going to be a lot of regulation that's either already being processed or coming. So how has this affected the way which BTC Markets has set up their systems and looked at, how they're going forward? But I remember you mentioned before that they have looked at it from a very good policy way, but I just hope you could expand on that, please.
Yeah, of course. So there is an organization, a government body here called AUSTRAC, which looks after the what's called KYC, or know your client. So when you open up a bank account, you have to provide documentation that proves you are who you are, and you live where you say you live. So usually it's photograph ID and proof of address, that kind of thing. And so BTC Markets were already doing that before we were regulated by AUSTRAC. So it's just as good practice from the outset, because I think the founders of the business really recognized that there are risks and responsibilities that come with taking, people's money comes in, and, we have to be able to facilitate proper trading. And one of those pieces, as I say, would be KYC. So we were already doing that before we got regulated by AUSTRAC. And then when I came in a couple of years ago, one of the main kind of roadblocks I saw to our own growth as a business was the lack of regulation that existed. That gave financial institutions like banks and so forth a reason to not bank us. And that also has proven really difficult then to obtain professional services like insurance products, for example. So that's a problem for everybody, not just us as an exchange. It's a problem for all of the Australians that are trading crypto. We need to be within the banking system. We need to be able to obtain insurance. And it's of benefit to you as the end user. And the biggest inhibitor to that was the lack of a regulatory regime that was suitable. It also meant then that for us, when we looked at the existing financial services regime, it was like putting a square peg into a round hole, because things like settlement and clearing, they don't really work, right? Because it's instant settlement. We don't need the same constraints. So we need something that's going to be fit for purpose, but also leaves room for innovation. And when you look at different regulatory regimes as they currently exist, I mean, they go out of date quite quickly because of the speed with which cryptocurrency changes and the whole thing evolves. But we've worked very closely, in our role at BTC Markets, but also as a board member of Blockchain Australia, we've worked really hard alongside the Morrison government, Senator Bragg, Minister Hume, in crafting or advising and giving our own opinions on. We obviously didn't write it. Their Digital Services Act, which they announced at Blockchain Week just last week. We have consulted with the Treasury Department on this. We've worked very closely with them, and kudos to them. They've been really, really quick at getting up to speed on some of the issues, and can be quite complex, because just trading cryptocurrency is the straightforward stuff. It's when you go into DAOs, and it's when you go into DeFi and all of that, like the next wave,
all the other stuff.
Yeah, that it can get really quite complex quite quickly, but I think they're taking the right approach on it. But ultimately, obviously with the election coming up, we don't necessarily know what's going to happen on the side of that election. But whether Australia likes it or not, they have to formulate a policy. They have to formulate, whoever's in government has to formulate a policy on this. The European Union is pushing forward. The UK is going to announce it in the coming weeks. The US, President Biden announced an executive order about regulation across the whole gamut of government agencies. There is no time anymore for us to luxuriate and ponder. Instead, we have to push forward, and it's so important, or else we will be left behind. And we've kind of done quite well previously. We've gone quite a foot forward previously, and then we kind of sat back a bit and let others overtake us. Now we're kind of galloping again and pushing forward, and I really hope we don't lose that regulatory momentum. And for us anyway, as an exchange, we're very excited about it, about the possibility of where regulation can lead us. I don't think anyone in financial services takes it lightly. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. But over the past couple of years, we've worked and built a business that's ready for regulation, I think is probably the best way to put it. We're ready for when it comes.
But it's so cool to hear how not only has BTC Markets within itself, prepared for that, but also aided in the move for governments to actually create this regulation. So I think that's super cool. And now, before we wrap up, I want to just get your view on what is the future of money overall, of transactions. Tell us your thoughts.
Okay, so I get quite nerdy on this. So tell me to wrap it up if I go too far in. I like I was saying to you, I really do feel for as I said to you, over the course of history, we've seen money change in terms of its meaning, in terms of its physical manifestation, but its meaning hasn't changed. It's still an exchange of value from one person to another. And with each wave of technology, we've seen that format change, but never its real significance, never its real meaning. I think what we're going to see into the future, the fact it's going to be a digital economy is not up for dispute. The fact we're going to have digital money, not up for dispute. Whether it's a CBDC, whether it's a stable coin, whether it's crypto, that's the world we're moving into. There is still, in my mind, a role for physical cash, simply because there are a number of different groups within our society for whom that makes sense. There are people, for example, who are older, or people who have got some disabilities, or other purposes and reasons why they still prefer physical cash. And I think we're obliged as a country to recognize that and to continue to do so. But on the flip of that, then you also got a really good use case for the speed, the transparency, the ease of those digital transactions. For us as a business, the way I see it, I think the winner is going to be the platform, whether it's an exchange or other. It's going to be the platform that provides a really useful and easy way for Australians to transition between fiat payments or a fiat transaction like your regular bank account and your crypto or your digital asset. And it's the platform that can give the user a really speedy, smooth transition between the two. That's the winner. We are still very much in the early stages of that, looking at the user experience on a number of different platforms. Super clunky. That's something that we work with a lot. We're constantly trying to invest in and improve. And particularly if you look at decentralized finance and trying to explain what a DAO is, there's a lot of work we can do on that, but the industry is doing that work. And I think we're going to see that change. I think too, the role of NFTs is going to be significant because that's going to impact culture and the add-ons and things that you can build around NFT technology. Really fascinating, really interesting, really transformative. So I think it's more like hold on to your hats. This is just going to be a wild ride. And for me professionally, this is the second time I've done this after living through the internet, the birth of the internet era, and now living in this age. It's really exciting and quite breathless. It never stops.
And that's so amazing. And you're also leading this new age, which is super cool. So thank you so much again, Caroline, for meeting me today, talking on the Mentors Connect podcast and sharing all these amazing insights. It's been so cool to listen.
Thank you so much, Claire. Really good.